Hey, this is Captain Everyman. And I've had this question in my mind for years. My favorite Trek series was Deep Space Nine, and you keep hearing this little catchphrase over and over again. It's the darkest of the Treks. And hadn't thought about this for years, but Colin Meaney was being interviewed recently, and somebody asked him that question, that this was a series that was the darker Trek, and he came back with, no, I don't think so. And I never thought so either. So I want to discuss this. It's something that Deep Space Nine fans have probably heard over the years, and I never did think it was true. And so I started thinking about that. Is this really true? Is this show any darker? Does it have darker episodes? Is it like really that much more serious than the others? I think that maybe I want to say there's fewer sort of goofier episodes on Deep Space Nine, but then I think about every Ferengi episode is like that. And there were quite a few of those. So can I really say that? I can't even say that. So I started going back to look who really has the darker episodes of all the Star Trek series, and I started thinking back to the original. I'm thinking, which episodes really made me think, wow, this is really depressing or dark. This is really serious. There's not any humor here. And the first episode that came to mind was What Are Little Girls Made Of on the original show. And that was when they go to the planet and they find Roger Corby, supposedly, which is a friend of Nurse Chapel. And he calls up to them and they go down. And when they get there, it turns out they're all robots. They end up killing each other. And at the end, she talks to Roger Corby, supposedly, and realizes it isn't him. And at the end, it just feels really dark and depressing. There's no humor here, really. There's no redeeming factors here that make you think anything. It's just kind of this nihilistic, depressing thing. And I'm thinking that was pretty dark. And I can't think of anything on Deep Space Nine that was really darker than that. Then there was City on the Edge of Forever. Kirk falls in love. And then he has to watch the woman he's fallen in love with get hit by a car knowing it's coming. And he's really jolted by that, of course, and there's the exchange between Dr. McCoy and Spock where he says he knows. So, he has to watch the woman die, although he's in love with her. And I think about Khan. How dark was he? I mean, he comes back for revenge. He's basically trying to take over everything and restore himself to power. And they talk about how, and even that paints a really dark future for humanity, where they have these wars over these genetically engineered people, cause all this war and destruction. Something, and then that's pretty dark. And then what's really the darkest episode maybe is the Doomsday Machine, where Commodore Decker is agonizing over everybody he let get killed, and he goes back and he dies, and there's no like joking and upside down. It's a completely dark episode. And so I'm thinking, where is this tag really coming from? Why are they saying this? Because I never really felt that Deep Space Nine was so much far removed or had a different tone than these others. So I'm thinking, well, there you go. The original series was dark then because it had plenty of dark episodes in it. And I start thinking about Next Generation. And the best of both worlds. I mean, Picard being assimilated by the Borg. I mean, how much darker can you get, really, than that? That was just a horrible thing. And then they even go into the aftermath, where he goes home and visits his brother and how emotionally traumatized he is. That's dark. I think of the episode where he's tortured for Picard again. I mean, this man goes through a lot, doesn't he? Picard's tortured by the Cardassians. And then, that famous scene where he shouts, there are four lights. You remember that? It was dark. That was incredibly dark. I mean, but yet somehow Next Generation isn't labeled as dark, although it had that. I'm thinking one that really got me was there was an episode called Schisms, and the Schisms is where all these people are being experimented on by aliens, but they don't remember. Then finally, at the end, somehow they revive their memories, and they do. But it's completely dark. I challenge you to look at that. There's no humor there. It's just really creepy and eerie, and it's horrible to think somebody's like fiddling with you while you're asleep and you don't remember it. How creepy is that? Dark is that? So there's a dark one. they talk about sort of like politics and how the Federation is painted as not as perfect in DS9, which is not true. They're just going through these really trying times where everything's tested. But you think about the Federation seeming compromised and not living up to its ideals. The Next Generation had this episode called Pegasus. And this is where, against the treaties, so they've actually violated one of their treaties and broken the rules. They developed this cloaking device for this ship called the Pegasus. So that seems pretty dark. Yet nobody refers to that. Still nobody says Next Generation is dark. And the one episode I think of every time we think about dark Star Trek episodes is that episode, I think it was called The Offspring, or something similar to that, where Data basically manufactures his daughter. But then the Federation runs in and tries to take her from him. And because of that, she basically commits suicide. I mean, how dark can you get? So, I mean, I see that as like a major darkness in both of these previous incarnations of Trek. They're dark. They're pretty dark. And then I thought about DS9. Sure, there's war going on. But do they really have episodes that are any darker than that? And I can't think of any. There's two that came to mind. One was The Valiant. And The Valiant is where you got all these like young Red Squad cadets who are sort of like it's sort of like Moby Dick in a way. They go after this Cardassian like warship that is a huge, powerful thing. This Dreadnought class ship, like. And they're in a ship that's like the Defiant. So, I mean, it has a lot of firepower, but still, you would think that there's no way they could take that ship on and defeat them. But they try, and they all end up dying, of course. And that's completely dark. But it's not any darker than the other episodes I named, and there really aren't that many episodes like that on Deep Space Nine that are completely dark. I can't think of Cisco going through much else. Sure, at the beginning, he's lost his wife to the Borg, but is there anything really that dark? As you know, as these other episodes, The Valiant is. I don't think the Siege. I'm getting confused. There was a siege on the Enterprise, or episode called The Siege. I'm sorry, on Deep Space Nine, it was called The Siege. I think it was Siege of. It was like AR-55 something, 8 or 9 maybe. And in this episode. This is the episode where Nog loses his leg and they have to fight the Jem'Hadar. But still, this is like your classic war type episode. I mean, you know going into it what it's about, but is it completely dark? It is in a way. But you know, they get the victory. It's like, it's exposing how horrible war is and all that. But to sum things up, in my mind, Deep Space Nine was never the darkest of the Treks in any way, shape, or form. I mean, I could speculate on why I think it got labeled that way, but I'm not. And but it was actually not any darker than the other episode or the other series at all. They all had sort of darkness in it. That was one of the trademarks of Star Trek. They had these elements and these contrasts. Some episodes were really humorous. Some episodes were more political and social in the focus. And Deep Space Nine was like that too. But all in all, I would say Deep Space Nine really wasn't quite as dark as some of the other two, and even maybe even Voyager had kind of dark episodes more so, where things were out of kilter. I think of Tuvix is the one that always comes to mind for me, where this new life form is created by melding two other ones together, and at the end, Janeway actually kills him. There's no other way to look at it. So, to sum it all up, Deep Space Nine was not the darkest of the Treks. It was about in the same mold, and I agree with Cole and Meany that it wasn't any darker. It was a great episode and the best series of Trek, and not at all the darkest.